Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time from October 3rd through October 9th of 2022. My name is Cam White, and this week isn't all that crazy. I must say, Mercury trine Venus is not actually happening this week. This is a typo I've made. Mercury is still retrograde as I'm recording this. Mercury is actually going to be trining Pluto this week. Not really the biggest deal, but it is a highlight to bring up. But really the only thing that we have going on is this full moon in Aries that's happening. So full moon, like I've said before, when we have, weeks in the astrology where there's not a lot of major planetary changes and it's just those lunar changes, I always like to emphasize on that being a time in which you can really settle things down and kind of focus in one area, right? When we get here in a couple weeks, when it's like Saturn stations direct and the eclipse and Jupiter goes back into Pisces and Mars retrogrades, there's going to be so much energy going on that you're going to feel a little bit scattered versus this is a week where you might be able to concentrate your focus a little bit more and a little bit better. Anyway, before I get started, something I want to say too is I now have an email newsletter up. Here in a couple weeks, I'm going to be making some pretty big changes to my weekly horoscope. I will still be making a weekly horoscope, but I will be rebranding it. However, in this new rebrand, I am going to be also be sending out emails. And something that I personally get concerned with is censorship online, and as you guys know, I can sometimes get controversial. So if you want to keep updated with me, please subscribe to my newsletter. If you go to my website and you go to the bottom, you should just be able to put in your email. I won't be spamming you with emails. I'll just be sending out emails when I make posts and everything like that. But pretty much, if you want to stay in contact with me, like if anything were to happen to my YouTube channel or something would happen to me, getting on my newsletter, giving me your email would be the best way to keep in contact, to keep on any updates of anything that might change. So I will be having a link to that in the description soon, but for right now, just go over to my website, camwhiteastro.com. If you scroll to the bottom, you should be able to put your email in there. But please go ahead and give me your email so I can keep in contact with you guys in case something were to happen. What else? There was something else I wanted to bring up, but I don't really remember. Yeah, full moon in Aries this week, guys. That's really the biggest thing, and that really doesn't even happen until Sunday, so let's go ahead and jump into it. The only thing that we've got really going on Monday is the moon making a trine to Mercury as it then conjoins Pluto. Again, I've talked about this a lot before. As the moon is in Capricorn, it's really just a good time to focus on your work, detach emotionally so you can kind of like put your emphasis into something. There's moments in time where it's appropriate to invest a lot of your emotions into something. And I really think with the moon in Capricorn, for example, if you're working on a project and you're working on, let's say, something really important, if you're investing all of your emotions into it, it's going to be a lot easier to be insecure about it, right? When you are, let's say, doing a job and you are emotionally attached to your outcome of that work, well, if that outcome isn't necessarily up to par, up to standard, it's going to be easier for you to weigh yourself down and be critical of you and be like, oh, well, because my work isn't good enough, then I'm not good enough in X, Y, and Z. And so when the moon's in Capricorn, it's a really good time to just detach from that. Just do the work. Don't take it personally and do what you have to do. The moon is going to be trining Mercury all day. Now that Mercury's direct, this looks like a lot of solution-oriented things. My only issue, or I don't even want to say issue, but maybe something to maybe think about is while the moon is conjoining Capricorn, fear. What is your relationship to fear? What is your relationship to power? Especially when it comes to Capricorn in the sense of tradition, the sense of doing things by the book, being very organized and planned. There might be the sense of fear around doing things that way, but I would also say just like an insecurity with the power that is around that. Let's say, if you're working for a corporation or let's say you have some powerful figure above you, that moon-Pluto conjunction might bring up a lot of that fear. It might bring up a lot of that power. But as the moon's trining Mercury here, this seems very solution-oriented. Again, being able to put the pieces together. It's easier to figure out a solution when you're not emotionally invested into why maybe it's not working out the way that you expected. If you can detach your emotions from the outcome and you can just be focused on what is the best solution, I think this will be a lot easier to handle. And as the moon conjoins Pluto right after that trine to Mercury, there is this opportunity to really go, hey, am I going to let this power and fear dynamic control me and my emotions, or am I going to let that empower me to create a result that I want? So Monday, not really the biggest day ever, but with that Moon-Pluto conjunction, I think it will be a little bit easier to lean into the fear stuff. So do your best to really transmute that into some personal power. But as we go into Tuesday, I'm liking Tuesday. The moon will go into Aquarius. It is going to make first making a sextile to Jupiter, and then it trines Venus all day. And I've been saying this as the moon enters these air and fire signs. It's going to be activating all of these planets that we have in all of the air and fire signs. And the moon goes into Aquarius. You know, it's not Capricorn where the moon is in detriment, but the moon in Aquarius, I feel like the moon in Aquarius can be very attached to, again, their society, their community. But there is this sense of being outcasted. There is this sense of being, betrayed almost. Maybe betrayed is actually not a good word, but I like using the word outcasted, alienated. But as the moon goes into Aquarius and sextiles Jupiter, I've said this before, there's something very empowering about, this is something I've been really reflecting about now that Saturn is getting ready to station direct, and we're almost done with Saturn in Aquarius, guys. I just made a tweet about this. Like, Saturn has been in Aquarius since the first day of lockdowns, and we're getting ready to finally get into the last phase of that, which is kind of a lot to process as both a human being and an astrologer. But with the Saturn and Aquarius stuff, the Aquarius archetype is like, there's a sense of being outcasted or betrayed or thrown out of a community or a group. And there might be a lot of resentment and hurt from that. But then there's a sort of side to it that becomes empowering, right? Where you become kind of a maverick and you kind of do your own thing. And this moon in Aquarius sextiling Jupiter and Aries is, I think, really seeing that side of it. Being like, okay, I'm over here now. And there is no going back. And how do I let that narrative, how do I let that belief affect me? Do I let it supercharge me? Do I let it, do you let that empower you, or do you let that weaken you? Do you give your power to everybody else and their opinions, or do you go your own way and find more strength and respect for yourself by developing your own opinions? And so this isn't easy stuff, but as the moon goes into Aquarius and sextiles Jupiter, I feel like there is this comfortable feeling of going out and doing your own thing. The moon is going to be then trining Venus, where there is this connection with other people. I'm going to eventually be making another Pluto and Aquarius podcast talking about the positive sides. And I think, this is a 20-year-long transit we're going to be going into, so it's not going to be stuff that just immediately, gets completely done overnight. There will be some things that happen overnight. But on the other side, there are people there too. On the, other side of, I'm about to sound so nerdy right now. If any of you have ever watched Attack on Titan, I'm not a big anime person, but that show is literally insane. I feel like that show really encapsulates the Aquarius energy really, really well. And long story short, it's about a group of people that live inside these walls, and they think this certain way of how reality is because they live inside these walls. But then at some point, people get outcasted and they go outside the walls, and they really learn that the world is actually a lot different than they were told. And in that show, it's not necessarily empowering. It's actually a really fucked up show. It's really crazy. It's really good. But, and some of you that are watching this probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But with the moon trining Venus here, where can you connect with other people? Where can you find harmony? Where can you relate and connect? And Venus is, combust right now. Sure, she's in her chariot, so it's not going to be immediately obvious as to who to connect to or to where the piece is really being made. But the other thing about this, and I've been talking about this, if you watched my 2022 year ahead horoscope, I recorded it like in August of 21. What's going on right now is as Mars is in Gemini squaring Neptune, a lot of truth is being revealed. And a lot of people might be questioning what they were told and what they believed. And while I think it'll be very easy to lean into the cynicism part of it and being, feeling very right, the moon trining Venus this is an opportunity to connect with other people. This is an opportunity to, once someone else can see a different story, once someone else can see a different perspective, that's an opportunity to connect. And I really look at this moon in Aquarius sextiling Jupiter, then trining Venus as like, how are you connecting to a wider group of people? How are you going about that? I don't think that's easy. I don't even want to say that there will be a major success in it. But this is an opportunity to connect. This is an opportunity to enjoy, and especially with people around you. Look how many air sign things are going on right now. We got Mars, Venus, Sun, Moon, Saturn. Everything is in the signs of ideas, of intellect, of rationality. And so this is an opportunity to connect with people on that level. So Tuesday seems pretty fine. I really like Tuesday. I think it seems very hopeful and at least optimistic. You know what I mean? It's kind of like in the stages of grief, it's like there's denial, which is one side of Aquarius, but then there's like the acceptance part of it. And this seems very accepting of where things are at right now. And as we move on to Wednesday, the moon will then conjoin Saturn and immediately square Uranus and trine Mars. This is a little bit of a doozy. This is a lot kind of all going on all at once. And I talked about this last week. Excuse me. Saturn and Uranus are less than a degree apart. You know, expect more of these supply chain issues to arise. The reason why inflation is so much of where it is right now is a lot of it's supply chain stuff. Yes, the Fed totally printed $6 trillion, and we can talk about that all day long. But a lot of this has been supply chain related. And that supply chain, the energy crisis as well, is going to continue with Saturn squaring Uranus. Unfortunately for my European followers, this actually affects your day-to-day life. You know what I mean? Unfortunately for here in America, we don't necessarily share the same issues. But I look at this moon Saturn. I mean, the moon, it hits Uranus first and then it conjoins Saturn like within the same hour. So while this moon is in Aquarius and our emotions are very attached to society, our networks, our tribe, or our whatever you want to call it, that moon will square Uranus where that isn't a stable area. You know, Saturn in Aquarius is a fixed sign, right? We want our groups, we want our society, we want our networks to be fixated. We want them to be stable, right? But with that squaring Uranus, that isn't necessarily true. And I think as the moon squares Uranus, there is this kind of heightened feeling of, it's if you ever watch Hot Rod is one of my favorite movies. It's absolutely brilliant. Andy Samberg's best work. It's how he got on the map. If you haven't watched it, there's this scene where it's like, 3/4 of the way into the movie where they're like all like marching along down the street, and then they kind of do that Hollywood play where like a bunch of people follow them into the street, and it's like this heroic moment where they're going to go do the big jump, but then it just turns into like a riot and everything breaks. That's what this is. Think of like the George Floyd protest. They didn't necessarily, this is actually, you could probably argue that it was a little bit more of a riot than it was a protest. But people weren't initially going into that to, burn everything and cause all of this, ruckus, right? It was this idea of being collective together. But then that turned into, setting places on fire and, then the psyop of, the CIA putting bricks in random abandoned police cars for you to light on fire randomly. And I know that's controversial, but what I'm trying to say here is that being stuck in this collective, you're going to find a lot of problems. You're going to find a lot of disruption. I mean, you could bring this up with the whole Ukraine stuff, right? Everyone in Europe is like, we have to stand with Ukraine. Well, that means you ain't going to have a warm winter. That might backfire on you. Being collective, being stuck with this group of people might backfire. And while the moon is conjoining, it's going to square Uranus and then immediately conjoin Saturn, where it's like, again, I think of that Hot Rod scene where he's like, they're all just like, it's a good moment, and then someone just fucking breaks a window and then chaos lets loose. And this is one of those things of, if you're in the wrong boat, you might be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I look at moon conjoining Saturn as feeling stuck, feeling trapped with these people. And Saturn Aquarius is like the intellectual divide, the literal walls that separate us on a like literal, rational, intellectual level. And that moon conjoining Saturn is feeling very stuck in that place. And it's moon squaring Uranus, then conjoining Saturn, where it's like, I'm here, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I look at Wednesday as feeling very disruptive and then feeling very stuck. And that might feel very frustrating. I think Wednesday will have a lot of tense feelings. It will feel very trapped. It will feel very isolated. Saturn is getting ready to station direct here at the same time. That's something we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. But Wednesday looks rather frustrating if you are expecting things to go smoothly. I think if you are expecting things to be very disruptive and then also feeling like you have to pick a side, I think it'll be a little bit easier to handle because you'll be expecting those things, and that's what's going to happen. But I think another way to go about Wednesday is just kind of knowing, for example, nothing is stable right now. We are in a very, very mutable time in humanity right now. There's a lot of things changing. And so this is one of those things of like, if you are going to ride a boat, let's say you're going to, maybe this is a hardcore analogy, but let's say you're one of the, the Cubans getting on a boat to come here to America. If you are in that boat, like you have to expect that there are going to be rough waters and that you may not make it. This is one of those feelings of you are here and you are going to have wrenches thrown in your plans. And that's something that you just have to accept, because I think if you deny it, it's going to be a lot harder to deal with versus if you're already expecting that, you might have, a solution already kind of worked up or ways to navigate that might be a little bit easier to deal with. So I think on Wednesday, just expect that, you're like, again, if you're on a boat from Cuba going to Florida, you're in that boat. You're not getting off unless for one, you die, or two, you get on land. And this is one of those things. You're in this boat and now all of a sudden there's a storm and things are going about. Who are you in that situation? What do you do in that situation? And I think, for me to be positive about this Saturn Aquarius stuff, this is a time to join together with people. I think it's important to understand what the difference is between working together with people versus letting people control you. Like Saturn in Aquarius is about authorities taking control over, our infrastructure and society and dividing us on all of these stupid things that don't actually matter while they totally prep for World War III. So you have to understand the difference between being trapped by a certain, I don't even want to say an ideology, but a certain authority over a certain mindset versus how do you use the collective. I mean, this is also Uranus too. This is about liberation and freedom. How do you connect yourself with the collective, very Moon, Saturn, Aquarius, and how do you control that situation to bring about, for example, the biggest innovations in life come from problems that have hit to the highest degree. And it really makes sense. What I'm trying to say here is like solutions really come about at like the most problematic times. So you might find yourself in a problematic situation, but this is also an excellent time to find a solution. And I think that solution is figuring out where you can steer the ship. Like, you know what I mean? And I've brought this up before, like the guy at a dance festival dancing like a weirdo by himself, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people join in because he made it okay. Don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to be that maverick. Don't be afraid to influence the people that you feel are controlled and trapped, because you actually can make a difference. I think that is something that is so important to realize right now, especially with this war tension hyping up, with all the vaccine stuff. Your independent thought and your independent voice can make a difference in the collective if you believe that you have that power. Because if you don't believe that you have that power, well, guess what? Nothing's changing. So I'd really look at Wednesday as I don't want to say a breakthrough opportunity, but there will be a lot of issues that come up, and there will be opportunities that come with that, debating whether or not, and that's up to you to decide if you want to take those opportunities. We go into Thursday. The moon goes into Pisces, and Mercury trines Pluto. So again, this is like the actual highlight of this week. I know it says Mercury trine Venus, I'm sorry. But as the moon goes into Pisces, this is where things somewhat kind of calm down. What I do enjoy about the moon in Pisces is that it's very distracted. And sometimes that's a good thing. Maybe this is a hardcore analogy, but I like to think of when you are in a shit situation. Like, well, for example, let's say you're a Jew in the Holocaust, right? You can't be constantly thinking about how everything is horrible. There has to be moments where you find that inner peace and that inner solitude. And that's really what Pisces is about, right? Going within, going on that faith journey, right? Sagittarius is more about the explorative part of faith, versus Pisces is more about it's a female sign, right? It's the yin energy of going within and finding that peace and finding that faith and finding that hope. And then Mercury trines Pluto, where this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because as Mercury's trining Pluto, that might look one way on like a geopolitical level, but as Mercury's in Virgo trining Pluto, you have an opportunity here to use power, right? You have an opportunity to, this is Mercury in Virgo. It's now separating from Neptune, so we're kind of over the Neptune stuff. We're seeing things a little bit more clearly. We're a lot more organized. And how are you utilizing that information? Is it so overwhelming that you become paralyzed? Or do you take away that fear? Do you let that fear just go away and you kind of really channel your higher self? You really step into that zone of really being in the moment, and you use that for power, whatever that looks like too. Power can be used for good. Of course, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's true. I would hope that a lot of you guys look at this as a opportunity to take power and use it for good, but that's your guys' own personal decisions. But I think this is a day to really utilize that power that's available, and that power is going to be coming through information, through communication. As the moon's in Pisces, I think this is a time where you have to get inward, right? The moon in Capricorn is like detached from your emotions. The moon is in Aquarius, where it's kind of like your emotions are very attached to society. As this moon's in Pisces, this is like, how do you think for yourself? If all your friends are jumping off a cliff, this is that moment where you go, do I want to jump off a cliff? Where do you find that peace inside? And this is the moon gaining in light, right? This is the moon getting ready to go into this full moon in Aries, where full moon in Aries, we're taking decisive action. We're being very, forthright with what we're doing. And I think as the moon goes into Pisces, this is that moment to get yourself emotionally ready for that. Whether that looks like prayer, whether that looks like meditation, but like if you're about to go into a war, do you want to sit there in crippling anxiety, or do you want to like find the warrior within and get connected with that part of you in order to, get the success that you want? And so I think a lot of this moon in Pisces transit is, it's the locker room before the big game. It's that pep talk. It's that getting into your moment before you go out into the field and execute. So that looks somewhat powerful, in my opinion. I think it might feel a little foggy and confusing, but as long as you center yourself, I think you'll be finding the solutions just fine. We get into Friday, and the moon will be then squaring Mars, and it will conjoin Neptune. This is where it gets hard. This is where it gets really hard. The one thing I want to say about this, too, is guys, like, these next few months and what information comes out is going to be hard to swallow, is going to be hard to deal with, and it's going to feel very confusing. If you have been aware of how specific narratives have been used to control and manipulate society at large, this won't be that much of a surprise to you. But I think on a collective level, this will feel very overwhelming. The moon conjoining Neptune and then squaring Mars is literally like, wait, what? Like, what? Like, it's kind of like maybe, let's say you're a soldier in World War II and you think you're getting deployed to fucking, somewhere off a naval ship somewhere in the Pacific, but then all of a sudden you get word that you're going to D-Day and you're the first boat. You're like, wait, what? The moon's going to conjoin Neptune, and I didn't even bring this up. The moon will go opposite Mercury too. So this might question a lot of the information and the data that you have. But I truly believe that faith is much more stronger than facts, right? Facts change all the time. The science changes all the time. And I think as that moon conjoins Neptune, this is an opportunity, I think, again, to get more deeper into your own spirituality. And if you don't, I think this will be a very confusing time. I think as the moon conjoins, I should say the moon will square Mars first, where Mars and Gemini might want clear orders. Mars and Gemini might want the data and all of the information in order to act, but you may not have that. You may not have that opportunity. And as the moon conjoins Neptune, you might be in this fog or this cloud of confusion. And that might be very challenging to deal with. I think the way around this is trusting your instincts, trusting your gut. You don't need, you don't have to see, and, I've talked about this before, but, when I did some youth, what would you call this? There was a summer camp that I volunteered for, where we took inner city youth, and we took these boys and gave them team building skills, just really just helped out like a really, I don't want to say a shitty group of kids, but kids that did not have healthy role models in their life. We really tried to install healthy, ways of looking at masculinity, at looking at teamwork and all this other stuff. And we did an exercise where we guided these kids up a mountain with blindfolds. And that might sound a little bit weird, but the idea of it was, how much can you trust someone? Because what would often happen is while they're blindfolded, I would tell them, you're fine. Just take a step forward. Just take a step forward. But they would question it in their mind. They didn't trust me, right? I'm just some guy. So they would go over here, and then end up getting lost. One kid went all the way over here, and while the other ones are over here. And it's a trust exercise. Can you trust the person next to you and that they'll guide you the right way? Or are you more concerned with not being visually impaired and not seeing things for yourself? And I know, like, I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, just trust people blindly, but this is one of those times where you might have to do a trust walk. You may not have, again, what? I'm blindfolded. I have to go up a mountain. How am I supposed to do this? Wait, what? Don't worry about how. Don't worry about how it's all going to go down. Worry about the why. Why do you want to go up the mountain? Again, worry about trusting yourself and being in that moment. And it's going to cause a lot of fears. It's going to cause your mind to go a million miles an hour, but it's your job to really silence that voice and get internal. And, same thing with these kids. A lot of them, when we asked them how they did, they said a lot of them felt the ground and they could figure out if they were on the trail or not. And that's very Pisces. Let's use your feet to navigate things, right? Connect yourself with the earth. Do you feel the rocks and the dirt in the trail, or do you feel the soft grass? And are you letting yourself connect the dots of if you're on the right path or not? There's a lot of sensory inputs that we have as human beings that will let us know if we're on the right path or not. And I really advise you guys to use those sensory inputs on Friday. So then we get to Saturday, and the moon will go into Aries and conjoin Jupiter. This is really, I think what was the most powerful thing about working with these kids is, it's kind of hard to talk about without crying, because it's really powerful to see someone who is young really, these are young kids, so they don't really know their beliefs. They don't really question their beliefs. They're just programmed off of their environment and their parents. But then when you give them that opportunity to see that belief change and you see them make that click, it is very powerful. I've still have yet to experience anything more powerful than helping these kids out, because it was just, not only helpful for the kids, but helpful for me. And I look at Saturday as this moon conjoining Jupiter in Aries, because that's pretty much it. The moon will go into Aries, it'll conjoin Jupiter, and it's pretty much just there. Yes, we're building up into the full moon at this point, and the full moon will be started at this point. But this is as the moon conjoins Jupiter, you have an opportunity to install more faith in yourself. I think as the moon is conjoining Neptune and squaring Mars, all of your voices in your head telling you can't, telling you this, telling you that, if you just shut that shit down and you don't worry about it and you trust the process, if you trust that process and you stop questioning everything, there is a breakthrough on the other side. And I look at this moon conjoining Jupiter in Aries, and Jupiter's retrograde still at this point. We're still really trying to, again, Jupiter in Aries is just go for it. If you just believe it, it'll work. Now that Jupiter's retrograde, we're really starting to do the deeper work of hey, do I actually have this belief in myself? Because sometimes you have to do it to believe it, and sometimes you have to believe it to do it. And right now, this is kind of that test of faith. Do you actually believe this? And I believe as the moon conjoins Jupiter in Aries, you're going to realize if you believe it or not. And you'll know whether or not you believe it if you're on top of the mountain or you're way off the trail when that blindfold comes off. And so as the moon conjoins Jupiter, I think this is an excellent opportunity to really go wow, I am capable of these things. Wow, Jupiter retrograde in Aries, I am capable of doing more than I initially thought I was. And, again, now with Jupiter retrograde, it's easier to get insecure. It's easier to question our beliefs. It takes a lot longer. It takes a lot more work and effort to install those beliefs. But that moon conjoining Jupiter is really powerful in terms of realizing what those are. And you might realize your shortcomings. But maybe that's what you need right now, is maybe you need to realize where you don't believe in yourself. Maybe you need to realize where, when you listen to all these voices and get all confused, that you'll get lost off the trail. And so Saturday is going to be kind of I don't want to say a slap in the face, but an opportunity to really know for sure if you can trust yourself and you can guide yourself or not. I really like Saturday. I really like this moon conjoining Jupiter. I think there's a lot of reflection on what we believe about ourselves and our capabilities. But I also think it might be very something that I've struggled with a lot. And maybe it's because I'm a Sag rising with Jupiter and Capricorn squaring Saturn and Aries, so I have a lot of hardcore shitty beliefs about myself. But I remember there are certain things that I did that I did things that went against my beliefs. And when I did those things that went against my beliefs, it kind of shattered my reality. And I don't want to say it weakened me, but it strengthened me in a way that looked like vulnerability. It was literally I wish I could go into the story a little bit more. It would just take a little bit too long. But when you achieve something that you didn't think was achievable, it's not as so much as just patting on the back and you feel great. Sometimes that really brings up the hardcore programs that you've been installed to believe your whole life. And when your beliefs get challenged on a cellular level, it like the body has a shock. And so this might come as a shock to you guys on Saturday. But I think that's a good thing. You know, that is that shock, that sense of really breaking through a belief. That shock is your brain literally rewriting your programming. That is your brain literally rewriting the way that you'll see everything on a subconscious level. So that's what I have to say about that. Let's go to Sunday. Whoops. Sunday, the moon will go opposite Venus, and then we have the full moon in Aries. And then for the rest of the evening going into next Monday, the moon will be applying to a sextile with Mars. I love the moon opposite Venus thing. I think when the moon goes opposite Venus, there is this sense of like, people are there for you. Relationships can help you, but you have to be the one that makes the first move. I think with the moon going opposite Venus, there is this sense of, you know, going back to that trust factor, you know, with these kids of like, you know, that was one of the first things that we did with these kids. And after that, a lot of them had a different definition of trust. A lot of them looked at us different. Because at first they're like, fuck all these guys. These are like inner city kids. They're fucking gangsters. They didn't give a fuck about any of us. But after we did this exercise, they're like, okay, maybe you're a little bit cool. Maybe I can actually trust you a little bit. And I look at this moon opposite Venus as maybe if you have the confidence instilled in yourself, you can have that confidence with other people in your life. And I feel like, and that's what this Libra Aries axis is like, you know, if you can trust yourself, you can trust other people. I've quoted this before, but I'm a big fan of Veil of Maya. Well, I used to be. I don't really like their new stuff, but one of their like first big songs, like the main lyric is this, like, how can you trust yourself if you can't trust anybody else? And I think that's a really important look at with this Aries Libra axis. You know, once you do that work and you have that confidence, you are then creating that space for you to have confidence in other people and for other people to have confidence in themselves. If you don't have confidence in yourself and you don't think that you can do it, well, you are creating a space of discouragement with other people. If you don't believe you can do it, well, then you're allowing other people to believe that they can't do it as well. And that's really where I go into like the giver taker stuff of like, it's really like you are more important than you think. You know, society loves to tell you you're not powerful. I talk about this in my, you know, Finding Your Purpose episode on the delineation, but when you do things for yourself, you are creating that space for other people to do it for themselves too. And that's the most important thing. People are watching you. You might not think they are, but they are. And you're either allowing them to be shitty or to be great. And I'm not perfect at this. I really challenge myself on this level, but this is why I like to do what I do. I want to make it known that like you guys are capable of literally doing anything. Because if I sat here and said, well, the full moon's in Aries, you can't do shit about it and you suck. Well, then, you know, then you guys are just going to sit there. I mean, I probably wouldn't also get that many views, but you guys would also just sit in your bullshit. And that doesn't help anyone. Why would that wouldn't help anybody? You know, I got into like a kind of a quarrel on Twitter about this topic because astrologers love to sit here and be like, you're not good enough. You should just accept all your flaws. Like, no, fuck that shit. Stop fucking accepting your reality if it's shitty. Like, you can change your reality if you allow yourself. Ask any person that's immigrated to this country and started their own business and became successful. Ask any person that has had a handicap of some sort or a disability of some sort and still created the lifestyle that they wanted. It's rare. It's not easy. I shouldn't say not everyone can do it. Anyone can do it, but the first step is creating that belief that you can do it. And if your belief system is, oh, I have to just accept all of my flaws for what they are and that nothing can ever be better, well, guess what? That's where you're going to be. And this is where I was talking about last week. That's the difference between the victim mindset and victimization. We're all victims of something, but it's up to you whether or not you allow that victimization to control your life. And that gives more power into whoever victimized you. You're just giving all that power to them when you can take it for yourself and make more out of it. And then we get to the full moon. This is really realizing what you can do. Now, the hard part about it is Mars is pretty much squaring Neptune. Mars is going to be squaring Neptune. Mars is here for a while, guys. Over these next 2 weeks, Mars ain't moving that much farther. And it's going to be squaring Neptune the whole time. and Mars is moving very slow. And so as this full moon in Aries happens, it's also on Chiron. I'll even bring up Chiron for the Chiron people out there. The wounded healer, it's going to hurt a little bit. It sometimes hurts to realize that you're more capable of doing things than you thought you were. The only issue is that the ruler of this lunation is pretty much getting ready to station retrograde in Gemini squaring Neptune. Don't confuse yourself. Don't overwhelm yourself. I don't think this is about like full moon in Aries, just take charge and do everything. I think this is realizing what you can do, but what that looks like is making changes. Like I've said before, I think this Mars retrograde is an excellent time to make really long-term changes in your life. Because Mars is about action and drive, and it's in Gemini. We're gaining new information. We're seeing new ways of doing things. It's a mutable sign. We're supposed to be changing. Mars is going to go retrograde. We're going to be changing our plans. We're going to be changing based off the information that we get. But this full moon in Aries is realizing you do have the power to change. This full moon in Aries is realizing you do have the power to overcome that. This full moon in Aries is about realizing where you can step into that role. Allow yourself to step into that role, by the way. Like, don't diminish yourself. I don't give a fuck if people say it's corny or it's whack. Fuck them. Literally fuck everybody, by the way. This is my triad or dyad about Saturn in Aquarius versus Sun in Leo. It's either, cripple yourself or diminish yourself based off what everybody else thinks, or you can just be yourself and do whatever the fuck you want. I don't know what life you want to live. I know what life I want to live, and that is being more respectful of how I handle things rather than worrying about what other people think about me. I have a lot more pride in how much respect I give myself and doing the things that make me feel like I can respect myself versus just begging and pleading for other people to like me. There's no power in that. And that's not really what I'm here for. I don't really do astrology that disempowers, even though I think a lot of other astrologers do. So as we get to Sunday and we get to Mars square Neptune, I think this isn't like a day where you're just like, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to do that. This is a day of really sitting in that emotional feeling of like, I can make these changes. I am capable of making these changes, but these changes are going to take months. This is not something you're going to do overnight. You might find success in the first couple of days, but this is about the long term. Are you going to be able to, let's say you feel supercharged on Sunday and you're like, I'm going to start this, I'm going to start that. How long? Is it going to be a couple days? Will it be a week? Will it be 2 weeks? Will it be a month? How long can you do this for? And that's not to say, oh, you can't do this forever, but this is about, again, this isn't about like when you, let's say the locker room before a game, this isn't about, oh, we're just going to win this game. It's about how do I put the best effort I can? How can I give it my all? How can I take myself out of the situation, right? For example, if you've played football or something like that, or a sport, and that coach hounds you, like you need to stop doing this or this and that, when you're emotionally tied to that person's opinion, you're going to feel weak, versus if you detach yourself from that and realize that you are better and that you can do better, and that's what the coach sees in you, and you just not let the disempowering words or the criticism affect you emotionally, and you just say, you know what, I can do better. Let me change this. Let me change that. Take you out of it. I think it'll be a lot easier to do. But I think this is a long-term thing. This is a supercharged full moon to really say, I am capable of doing this. I can go for this. But this is something that is going to take months to do. This is not something that we're going to get figured out overnight. This is not something that we're going to get solved in just one blow. I think as Mars is squaring Neptune, we're going to feel confused. We're going to feel lost. We are going to go on a journey here. And I look at this full moon as an opportunity to fill that cup inside of you that has courage, that has confidence, that has ambition. And I think if you could fill up that cup, anything is possible with ambition and confidence. Literally anything. There's people that literally, like, something I love about science is people are like, oh, it's scientifically impossible. And then scientists somehow figure out something that was once looked at as impossible as possible. And so your reality is defined by your beliefs. What beliefs do you have here? And I believe with Jupiter and Aries, our beliefs are really focused on our capabilities, on our ambition, on our strength. And I believe this is a full moon to really look at how much strength do you have? And strength isn't necessarily just a measure about, muscle or, bravado, but like strength is a spiritual journey. And I love that with Jupiter and Aries of like, it takes a very strong will to do anything. Anyone with, strength of just like you have to be unbreakable. And this is a great full moon for that. I think with Mars, though, starting to move slower and slower, starting to get ready to get retrograde, squaring Neptune. Let's say it's game day and you go out on the field and they're doing different plays than you expected. Maybe someone gets injured that you were hoping would be, like, let's say your quarterback gets injured and all of a sudden the plan doesn't go the way that you thought. Are you going to let that define your reality? Or are you going to find creative solutions around that? And are you going to find ways to overcome whatever obstacles are given to you to still find the way, to still get to the achievement that you want? So don't expect things to be easy. Don't expect this to be easy at all. Expect this to be very challenging. But that's life. You can either accept this as challenging and be like, you know what, I'm just going to give up. And you're going to have a shitty winter if you just give up. You're going to have a really shitty time if you're just going to be giving up. I think you're going to have a shitty time as well if you don't give up, if you just like do it anyway, you just commit to it. It's still going to be hard. It ain't going to be easy. But the reward at the end of it is what you're working for. And it's not necessarily even just a physical reward. It's that mental reward. It's that you actually changed your belief about how you thought you could do something. You changed your belief, you changed your worldview, and you decided to say, I can do this. So I think if you allow yourself to be disempowered, I mean, that sounds like for a lot of you, it's probably just the same shit, different day. But why are you here? Why are we watching these videos? Why are we looking for spiritual guidance if we're not willing to take on the challenges that we know we have to take on to create better circumstances for our lives? So I think those are questions to ask yourself during this week. We get to next week. A lot goes on next week, guys. We have Mars squaring Neptune. A lot of information is going to come out, and it's going to be a lot to deal with. Mercury's going to enter Libra. I don't know how I feel about Mercury going back into Libra. I don't know. I might like it. It might be fine. Mercury goes opposite Jupiter, though. Again, a lot more of this truth, a lot more of the like things coming to the surface. Mercury retrograded in Libra, where maybe it was a little bit scared and timid to have these conversations. This is coming back in full force to say what needs to be said. And Venus trine Saturn, I think next week is a really great opportunity to connect with people that are on your side. Connect with people, with Venus in Libra in the superior position of Saturn and Aquarius, something I've tried to say too, and I'm not perfect at this. I really do struggle, I think, with this part of it is still making with the connections and still finding the peace with people that, a couple months ago wanted you to die and wanted you to, not travel, not have a job, not see your friends or family. I don't want to go off on that dyad, but Venus trine Saturn is like, there is an opportunity clearly to make peace, to connect with people. And I just got to say, if you've been a client of mine, I've told you the first 3 weeks of October are pretty fucking badass. The last week of October and the first week of November are pretty horrible. You really should enjoy this time. Like, do whatever that means for you, enjoy it. There's a lot of good energy here, and it's not going to necessarily be easy, but I think if you go out of your way to do more positive things, I think you will get more positive rewards from it. It won't be so awful. But that's what I got for you guys. So final thoughts. I feel like it was pretty clear with this one. My attitude with a lot of this stuff is going to be changing over the next few weeks because a lot of things are going to change over the next few weeks. The world stage, the COVID narrative, our personal lives, this country, a lot is going to be changing. And I think that as we undergo this change, this is the part of the Mars retrograde story. It's the hero's journey. We're going to be having, everything trine Mars, and then Mars will go retrograde, and then all of a sudden we're given a huge issue that we have to overcome. And so this is, while things might be very good right now, I think this is a time to really enjoy the good and realize the good that's in front of you, because that will be fuel to go through these next few months. And I don't say this to scare anybody, right? I really don't. Astrology, if you look at the astrology and you look at the world, doesn't look like all that much is going well. But the reason I use this practice and the reason why I do these videos is because I would rather know when things are bad and know when things are good so I can enjoy the good and deal with the bad stuff while it's bad, and know that there are times where this will change. It won't be bad forever. Things will get better again. And I think that there is a lot to gain in value from undergoing these changes and these problems with with confidence and with hope and faith. I think there's a lot to gain. So I think this week, realize that with all of the problems that are going to be coming up, realize that there is so much to gain on the other side if you do this the way that you know you should be doing it. If you actually listen to the call of your consciousness and don't just listen to your ego and don't listen to that side of yourself that tells you you're full of shit, or that side of you that tells you you're not good enough. Don't listen to that. Listen to the part of you that you know is real. Don't listen to your bullshit. No, listen to your actual truth. What you know is real, but it's so much easier to deny it because it goes against your beliefs. Challenge your beliefs. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys. I love and appreciate you guys. I will be seeing you next week.